Hey guys, it is April 7th, 2026 here with your after hours recap. Hopefully you guys all traded well today. Quite the interesting day. So right in the morning, you're getting a little bit of what felt like, the typical sell-off, as you've ramped up into supply. And then, you're getting a little bit of the sell-off and even, towards the end of the day. But then there's some news that comes out that, maybe Pakistan is asking the United States, hey, please extend it out 2 weeks. Iran maybe will open the Strait of Hormuz for a couple of weeks as a show of good faith. And, of course, the market closes very strong on that. But despite the news, price action is starting to improve, right? You get a gap down, you get bought up. You get a move lower, you get bought up. And ultimately, it is about the close. The closes are showing some strength. That is very, very good to see. Obviously, there was a pretty nasty move down in Apple today, but that got bought up fairly well. Amazon is just hugging underneath the 50 simple moving average. This one looks like it could start to maybe get back up above the 50. That is acting well. More importantly, the leadership that has been in the market for the last handful of months continues to stick around really well. SanDisk to me looks pretty dang constructive. WDC to me looks pretty dang constructive. STX to me looks pretty damn good. TER is another one that looks pretty damn good. GEV has been a leader for a while. Guess what? Looking phenomenal. Dell has been good. This one's one that I own, acting amazing. VIAV is an optic stock, acting, really, really nice. CIEN, new closing highs. CIEN, another optic name. Guess what? Effectively a new closing high. GLW, another optic name, looking really, really good. You did get a bit of a pull in crude oil. So obviously, the market's been moving a little bit inversely to the price of crude. But even recently, we saw crude have like an 11% up day, and the market did not budge lower on that. So that was really, really good to see. We'll just kind of continue, as I've been saying before. I don't think we've missed anything on the long side yet. When you look again at the Qs, you still have to get back above the 200 simple moving average. Even in down markets, you do get these sharp rallies. If anybody remembers 2022, I'm not saying that this has to play out anything like that. But, you'll get these downtrends below a falling 50, below a 200-day moving average, and then you get a rally back up into those key moving averages, and then you start to roll over. But ultimately, some pretty nice action today. Even out of AVGO, this was a name that I was short, and then it got above the 50. I tried putting some on against the 200. That did not work. I had to get out of my position, 331 if I'm not mistaken. And this thing closed pretty damn well. And how am I going to sit here and argue with price when price, in some instances, is trying to push higher? That is very, nice to see. It's a good change of pace. The market is really not far away from a potential follow-through day. We just need a pickup in volume, which we saw today. But, you need a combination of a pickup in volume with a 1% up day. And that's kind of what it'll take. I don't know that we're going to get it tomorrow. I have no clue. We'll see. The Neoclouds, the data center related stuff, NBIS, I thought was the most notable. Very, very nice strength, nice base building out of this name. Recently the last few days, right up the right-hand side. That is very nice to see. You kind of looked at CoreWeave, not looking nearly as good, but also nice little positive day today. You look at HUT, nice little positive day today, trying to get back above the 50 simple moving average. You look at WULF, another nice positive day today out of this one. Just has built a pretty big base, sloppy, but it is, for the most part, acting well. Am I a buyer of this thing tomorrow? No, probably not. But maybe a group to keep an eye on going forward. The aerospace and defense stocks, I still think that these act well, right? UFO didn't go anywhere. You had a little bit of a morning sell-off right into the 5-day, got bought up, and guess what? Effectively a new closing high. With that, I'll, of course, be watching Rocket Lab potentially tomorrow as a higher low setup. But, looking pretty interesting. Would like to see this thing eventually get back over the 50. But if and when it is capable of doing so, this one probably starts to speed up, on the back of the SpaceX IPO. But more importantly, you want to see a good market. I still continue to be short ARK, but even ARK, right, where you get a gap down, again, a gap down gets bought up, and a gap down basically gets bought up all day. That's not really negative. As negative as I have been in the past, price action is starting to kind of turn the corner. And I do not want to argue with price action going higher. I kind of did that a little bit today on CAR. And some might say that I was in a car crash. No, I'm just kind of kidding. But yeah, I tried this thing a handful of times, and right in the morning, this thing has an absolute dump, and I'm already sitting there, positioned well, and I'm like, oh wow, this is great. And then it reclaims VWAP, and I ended up covering some up a little bit higher, and then as soon as it took out highs a day, I basically had to get out, and I tried a handful more times, but the tape would just not get heavy. You would get, a little bit of a sell-off, but then the tape would get really, really thin, and then you just kind of get moved out of it. So again, I tried it a handful of times. You're getting, pretty damn extended 19 times its ATR from the 50. I do think tomorrow I will be keeping my eyes on this one again. I would love to see a morning push and squeeze and then a failure, and I would be trying that again. I don't think that, if the market's going up tomorrow, there's nothing really to say that car can't have a huge unwind. But that's just, kind of feels like a fund is blowing up in there. But again, that's just kind of the thing where if you're above VWAP, you guys have kind of heard Nick in the room say it over and over and over, don't get too stubborn. And kind of my mentality on it is I'm okay to try it. I'm okay to add more, but you have to start small. For me, it's like 3% portfolio positions, in some cases 2%, and then just add once it's working, and then kind of know where you're leaving if you're wrong. And don't just sit there and add and add and add and add and add on the way up. That's how you end up with a super duper outsized loss. I know they have a pretty big short float, but again, you start to get, 100 and some odd percent off these lows, 200%. And then, really since this move started in a straight line, 150%. I mean, it's kind of nuts. 19 times its ATR from the 50. In terms of market cap and dollar volume, this is the most extended stock in the market. But it does feel like there's a fund in there just completely blowing up, and who the hell knows what's going on. So USO, probably the group that got beaten up right at the close. We'll see what this one does tomorrow. Ultimately, if it's still above the 20-day, it is still in an uptrend. So I don't necessarily want to fight getting too aggressive on the short side in terms of crude, but I don't really see any setups that I necessarily love in that sector either. Home builders still struggling a little bit. The XBI ETF to me is building up fairly nicely here, so no complaints. If you're a biotech person, looks pretty constructive. And then anything else really that just kind of caught my attention? I mean, everything kind of down from the open. I mean, some things rebounded halfway well. GDX, a nice little push today. Dewey got some wiggle room into the 50-day. That one will kind of be interesting to see how that plays out. Ultimately, I think that does move with the dollar. Dollar higher, metals lower, and the dollar really doing absolutely nothing here. So, don't be too surprised if the metals, gold and silver, are doing absolutely nothing here. Again, I thought the aerospace and defense stocks continued to look pretty constructive. I think the optic names continue to look fairly constructive. I think the memory stocks continue to look well. It's nice to see the mags, although you get that big washout in Apple. It was nice to see it bounce back. It's nice to see Amazon, Google, hang out right at yesterday's highs. You even saw the cybersecurity stocks today, really, really nice up days. PanW was another one, really, really nice up day. And you did have a little bit of a bounce, nothing insane, but in the crypto space as well, back above the 50. Are we in a stage 4B setup for a potential to move a little bit higher? I don't see why not. But ultimately, we need a better market. If we can get a follow-through day, I don't know if we're going to get one tomorrow. I don't necessarily want to chase strength. or chase a gap up without kind of that follow through day. But you have a lot of stocks acting well, and I don't necessarily want to argue with the strength in the market. You're seeing a lot of strength in the market, so that's a positive. I mean, again, even look at a name like Intel. This is exactly what you want to be seeing out of some stocks. I didn't take a peek actually at AEHR again in after hours. Yeah, down slightly. MRVL continues to act pretty damn great. ARM comes right down into the 200 and holds really, really well. A slight gap, but I mean, just holds perfectly on the 200. So, stocks that are pulling back, they're finding support where they're supposed to, and, they're trying to push higher. So, again, I'm not going to complain with what I am seeing out there. I think that that's a positive, and the markets, look pretty damn good. So not good in the sense that they're still below the 200, and of course they've got some work to do, but look good in the sense that there are a lot of individual stocks, a lot of individual groups starting to come to life, and that is the exact thing we want to see. Where really you put in the bottom, and then every time you gap down, you're getting bought back up. Again, I know it's a really headline and news-driven environment, but if we can continue to get these leaders continuing to lead, then I think it's more important to pay attention to the individual action on stocks than it is to pay attention to, let's say, the S&P 500 while the mags are still getting their shit together. So kind of an interesting scenario out there, but be open-minded. Pullbacks into ascending moving averages for me is the way that, getting long is the most ideal. And then on the flip side, if you want to short into supply, like a falling 50-day, a falling, 20-day, a 200-day, also makes some sense to potentially manage risk against. And then ultimately, how is the market acting at the time you go to take those positions? But there are names starting to really, really take shape. They've been basing for a while, whether it's TER or GEV or an Intel. It's not all that bad. So hopefully the market can continue. Whether or not the market gives us a follow-through day or not, I have no clue. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens for the rest of the week. And if we get some kind of a, ceasefire for a couple of weeks and some more peace talk, then maybe the market can start to work its way higher from here, and crude could start to come back down towards the 80s. That would, I think, kind of set our market on a path towards, back towards all-time highs in the SPY. Just keeping an open mind again, and most of that is going to be based on the price action we are seeing in individual stocks. So just continuing to remain optimistic there. So hopefully, again, you guys all traded well. And I will see you guys all bright and early tomorrow morning. Cheers.